Wow, what an impressive group you all are. This is impressive. Well, the principals asked me to give a message on the dress code. And so so the thing that immediately leapt to my mind was Bruce Lee. You guys know who Bruce Lee is? He's the Jackie Chan of my era. And Bruce Lee was the beginning. He was the first of the Kung Fu martial arts stars. And I watched as many Kung Fu movies as I could get away with of Bruce Lee. And the thing is that every time I saw one of a Bruce Lee movie, I wanted to be Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, he wasn't a big guy, but he was very, very intimidating, very intense. And whenever he got into a fight, his muscles would just tense up, and his face would get fixed, and it would start to tremble and shake. And then he had this way of walking, which was cat-like. And so he's very smooth and light on his feet. And he could jump and kick guys that were 7 feet tall right in the chin, and then land on his feet again and go right back at it. Isn't that so? He was just like that. So there was one time when I saw a Bruce Lee movie, and I thought, I'm Bruce Lee. And so I started to move like him, and I started to tense up like him, and I started to make that cat-like noise that he made, you know, when he was getting ready to punch somebody. And so I challenged my brother to a fight. My older brother, my bigger brother. And so I started to move around like Bruce Lee. And I started to make the noises like Bruce Lee. And my brother's looking at me like... So I went to give him a kick. And he just sort of punched me right in the solar plexus and knocked me down. And that was the end of the fight. Now, okay, why am I telling you this? The thing is I saw a couple of movies about Bruce Lee, and I thought if I just acted the way he acted, in the way he acted in the movies, that I could be like him. What I didn't know, and what I didn't want to do, was to live the whole life that Bruce Lee had lived, so that he could become Bruce Lee, the superstar, so that he could become the world Kung Fu champion. I mean, he was an amazing athlete, but I didn't know everything that he did, all the practice, all the discipline, all the sacrifice, all the work that went into being Bruce Lee. And frankly, I wasn't interested in doing that. I just wanted to make the noises, I wanted to make the cat-like movements, and then I wanted to beat up my brother, but I couldn't. And so what I've learned over the years, through my own personal experiences, is that, and this is, and everybody will tell you, your moms and dads will tell you, that personal self-discipline is an indispensable key to accomplishing anything you wish to accomplish in life. It takes discipline and it takes sacrifice to achieve those things that you want to achieve. Let me give you some examples. Some of you are familiar with Ernest Hemingway. He is one of the greatest American writers that have ever lived. And the thing about Ernest Hemingway, although he had many flaws and faults, the one thing he did was that he worked and sacrificed for his art. He got up every single morning, it didn't matter how he felt. He got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and he wrote at the typewriter until noon, 6 hours straight. And then he would spend the rest of the time writing, proofing, rewriting, proofing his work. There was one book, A Farewell to Arms. I learned that he rewrote the ending of that book 17 times before he was satisfied with it and gave it to the publisher. Winston Churchill, a man credited for saving Western civilization against the Nazis, he won because, or he inspired a nation, he inspired a people because of the way he spoke. Well, he worked on his speeches over and over and over and over again, practicing them for hours so that when the time came to give the speech, he would have the power and the influence that he sought out of it. And then finally, although I learned that Michael Jordan practiced 3 hours a day on the basketball court, he asked a number of coaches to watch him. He spent hours in front of film so that he could perfect his craft, his sport, so that he could be Michael Jordan. I had lunch with Coach Crop, and he told me what this was before the season, before the fabulous season of this football season. He told me that what he was working on was to instill in the young men a sense of discipline and self-sacrifice and faith in God, and all of those things would combine to bring about, if not a winning season, at least a championship within their hearts. No one gets anywhere in life without discipline and sacrifice. And it's either in the arts, or in business, or in sports, or in academics. And you know what? The same is true in your spiritual life. The same is true if you seek to follow Jesus Christ. And here's where some of us fall short. And I know that I do, but a theologian said, our mistake is to think that following Jesus consists in attempting to love our enemies, go the second mile, suffer patiently and cheerfully from time to time, while living the rest of our lives just as everyone else does for the rest of the time. To follow Jesus takes the same amount of work and sacrifice and focus, just as we were singing about just now. The surrendered heart, the abandoned mind to Jesus Christ. Paul talks about it this way, the Christian life. He talks about it as the way of an athlete. He says to Timothy, his apprentice, he says, train yourself for godliness. And the word for train here is the Greek word gymnos. And from gymnos we get the word gymnasium. And so what he's saying to Timothy is he says, work out strenuously, exercise diligently, without any encumbrance, without any distraction or impediment. And for what do you have to work out for? What is it? It's for godliness. It's to be like God. To become like Jesus. To become everything you want to be in your life. Just think about the person you wish to be. Just think about the life you wish to have. You want to be good, you want to be true, you want to be honorable, you want to be loving and kind and admirable. He says all of these things require training as if you were in a gym. He says, or the writer of Hebrews says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And so the picture is just imagine you're in a coliseum, and there's this crowd of people, and they're all cheering you on and yelling. And you are running this race. And the race that you're running is your life. And they're cheering you that you would run it with endurance, that you would run it with strength, that you would run it with focus. And that's happening now. We can't see them, but that's what they are doing. And then finally, Paul again to the Corinthians, he says, every athlete exercises self-discipline. And what he means here is strict training in all things. And then he says for himself, so I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, or somebody who's acting like Bruce Lee. But I discipline my body and keep it under control. And so the question is, how did Jesus live his life that we might follow him and imitate him and become like him? How did he live his life? How did he run the race? Well, Jesus lived his life humbly, in a disciplined way, gladly being obedient to his dad, his father. He said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. He said, I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. He said, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." And remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before he was crucified, he struggled because he knew that he was about to be crucified. And what does he say? He says, "Not my will, Father, but your will be done." He disciplined himself right to the very end, even to his death. Now, what is the will of God for you? What is God's will for your life right now? You know what? I know what it is. I know what God's will is for your life right now, at least in part. And it is to be a student at Pusch Christian Academy, or a teacher, or an administrator. But for you all, it's to be a student here. That's God's will. And so he wants you to think of the school as a gymnasium where you are training, where you are exercising, where you are disciplining yourself to follow hard after him, to run the race. And God wants you to train your mind so that you can think truly like Jesus. He wants you to train your will so that you can choose wisely like Jesus. He wants you to build your body up so that you can act courageously and enduringly like Jesus. And he wants you to train up your heart so that you can feel compassionately in the same way that Jesus did. God wants you to become like Jesus Christ right here, right now, in all that you do. Because what he wants you to do is to become like his son so that you can experience the love of God, the joy of God, the peace of God, and the satisfaction of living a life that means something, that has significance, that you can look back on and go, this was good. Now, there are many ways to exercise yourself in this gymnasium of God's, and just one of those things is to wear the proper gear. It's to wear the right clothing for the work that God has called you to. And my young brothers and sisters, there is no avoiding a dress code. I am the headmaster of this school, and I am in dress code. If you join the armed forces, you are going to you're going to follow a dress code. If you're going to be a soldier, a sailor, a marine, if you are going to be an EMT or a firefighter, you are going to follow a dress code. If you're going to be a barista at Starbucks, you're going to follow a dress code. If you're going to work for UPS, you're going to follow a dress code. There is no avoiding it anywhere. If you go to a wedding, if you go to a funeral, whatever it is that you do, you're going to be following a dress code. What it is, it's just part of life. And it's also true here also. Now, what does dress tell you? Dress tells you something about your professional competence or incompetence. It tells you something about your education or your lack of education. It tells you something about whether you're prepared for the work that you're called to do or you're unprepared. So much depends upon what you wear and the way that people perceive you and the way you perceive yourself. Now, the primary reason, and listen, the primary reason why we want you to follow dress code is because here's just one more opportunity for you to make a decision every single day what you're going to do before God. Am I going to submit myself to God and yield my will to God in the same way that Jesus did? Or am I going to break it? Am I just going to follow my own will? Now, I know that dress code is a small thing. In some ways, it might be viewed as a trivial thing. But you know, your whole life is lived out in the small things. It's in the small decisions that you make that your life is built. Paul says to the Corinthians, he says, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. whether you eat or drink, how you ate your breakfast this morning, either gave glory to God or it didn't. And you get an opportunity when you get dressed in the morning to give glory to God. And that's how you train. That's how you build your muscle. That's how you build your spiritual character, is in the small decisions. So, we're going to be, I guess, are we going to hear more about this? Okay. So we're going to be monitoring the dress code, but just in the same way that we monitor ourselves. And we want you to look the very best that you can according to the calling that you're called to, so that you can grow up to be adult and mature men and women prepared for all the challenges that you're going to face in life, and in the small ways, namely, in this case, the dress code. Okay, so it's going to be a blessing. Following dress code is going to be a blast. It's going to be so much fun, and I'm already excited.
Thank you, Headmaster Cooney. Well, as he was speaking, I could just feel it right up here. I could feel some of you starting to get nervous and start to twitch in your seats a little bit. And some of you were actually, I could hear you whispering, "I'm not in dress code right now." That's what you were thinking. And I want to remind you, because you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's the prayer going to make us do if we're not in dress code right now?" That's not how we roll. But I want you to listen carefully. Because ultimately, the fact that this is an area of struggle for us right now as a school, as a high school in particular, is my responsibility. It's a reflection of my failure as much as it is yours. And also, I think it's important to look out and say that for many of you, this, first of all, is not just a message today about dress code. Although dress code was an example, the underlying theme is obedience. And as Pastor Cooney, Headmaster Cooney called us to, of being Christ-like in that obedience. Many of you, I'm able to commend you nearly every day. Young men and young women, I'm able to say, wow, you do a great job of modeling the freedom of our dress code. You do it well and with excellence. I mean, I could just have all kinds of you stand right now. So for many of you, this message will require no adjustment at all. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And even for the rest of you who have been struggling in this area, it doesn't have to be a big deal. We won't make it a big deal if you don't. But one thing that I've learned in trying to enforce this over the years, we've had many leadership changes at the top that have had different philosophies and viewpoints about it, is the biggest problem with enforcement is consistency. It's that some are called out for it while others are not. And because of that, it becomes a vexing issue, a frustrating issue. And it also becomes frustrating for those who do follow it faithfully every day and see those who don't. And because of that, again, that's my failure. And as I've reflected upon how to fix it working with our teachers, the only consistent way that I can come up with to try to do it fairly every day would be that we would start that way every day with morning announcements. And so what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, we're going to model this actually starting tomorrow, although the next 2 days are teaching days. Okay, it's a chance for you to adjust and correct. Starting Monday, we will actually, during the announcement time period after the pledges, ask you to remain standing. And we're going to actually ask your teachers at that time to check for dress code. To check not only that you're in dress code, but you're wearing dress code properly. And if you're not, you will be asked to come down to the office. And I'm thankful that Mrs. Cooney has actually volunteered her first period. She's free during that time to help with the enforcement of it with our young ladies in particular. I'll probably be dealing more with the young men. And obviously the issues that those two groups are struggling with are probably going to be different. But I'm giving you that notice now, okay, that we are serious, that we do want to fairly and consistently enforce this, knowing, as Pastor Cooney said, it's a small thing. But it is, in fact, the small things that greater things grow out of. Jesus said it very clearly, a man who can be trusted in small things can also be trusted in greater things. But one who cannot be trusted even in a small thing could never be trusted with greater responsibility. So that'll be coming. Again, starting tomorrow, you'll see that on announcements. The first couple days, a day of teaching and learning. We want there to be grace and mercy, a sense of humor in the enforcement of this. We also just want to give you fair warning. We have failed, and therefore we don't want to start today reflecting that by then holding you accountable for our lapse. So you will have fair warning to adjust to that before Monday.